Tonight's sleep story is about quiet relief, the kind that comes when you finally watch a classic film after years of pretending you already had. On this peaceful evening, you are at last watching The Godfather. Not out of obligation, but because the moment is right. There's no pressure now, no need to impress anyone, just the soft glow of the screen and the steady unfolding of a story that has waited patiently for you. For years, you nodded along. You smiled at the references, at the impressions, at the lines that had become more familiar to you than the film itself. Leave the gun, take the cannoli. You'd heard it 100 times, slipping into conversation like an inside joke you weren't quite in on. I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse. You knew the cadence, the weight of it, the way it landed in conversations. And yet, you had never seen The Godfather. It wasn't intentional, just one of those gaps that quietly became a habit. A movie you meant to watch, but never quite did. And then, over time, the omission became something else, something delicate, a secret, a small private shame carried through dinner parties, late night conversations with friends. Those quiet moments when someone would turn to you and say, "You know that scene in The Godfather?" And you would nod, expertly, hoping they wouldn't ask for details. Tonight, at last, the weight lifts. The charade dissolves. You settle into your well-worn sectional, the first thing you bought when you moved to Minneapolis. The air outside is cold, but inside, the soft glow of a lamp and the steady hum of the radiator create a cocoon of warmth. It's the kind of night that sneaks up on you, when plans dissolve, leaving behind an unstructured pocket of time. The weight of expectation lifts. The night stretches ahead, not empty, but full of quiet possibility. A gift waiting to be unwrapped. No interruptions, no obligations, just you, the flicker of the television, and the film you have spent years pretending to know. You pick up the remote and press play. The screen flickers to life. The deep, mournful strains of the score hum through the speakers, wrapping around you like something familiar, something inevitable. A film that has lived in cultural consciousness longer than you have been alive. The sepia tones spill across the screen, rich and heavy, pooling in the quiet space between you and the night. You sink deeper into the couch, the world outside fading, the long-delayed moment finally arriving. Marlon Brando speaks, and you listen. You hear the lines not as echoes from borrowed conversations, but as they were meant to be heard, a whispering menace, a quiet control. The way a man at the head of a family can move an entire world with a measured breath. The wedding scene stretches before you, rich with life, the kind of cinematic excess that lulls you into a world before it ever asks you to understand it. You watch the way people move, the way power shifts, even in celebration. You notice the way Michael hesitates, his shoulders not yet heavy with what will come. His world is still soft around the edges, full of warmth, of promises that seem distant enough to be avoidable. The sun-drenched lawn, the music, the speeches. It feels like a world apart from what you know will follow. And you recognize it, the moment before knowing. It's how you felt before you pressed play. The comfort of ignorance, the illusion that the weight of understanding could be postponed indefinitely. You were content in that space, outside of it all, nodding along, unburdened. But something in you shifted, just as something in Michael shifts. The point of no return is always there before we recognize it. An hour passes, then two. The film unfolds, a story both known and unknown, familiar yet entirely new. Its weight is gentle but unrelenting. The first whispers of violence are not in the gunshots, but in the spaces between words, in the way things are understood but never spoken. The dinner in the restaurant, the slow, measured moment before Michael stands, before he takes those steps to the restroom, before he reaches for the gun. And then it happens. One of those moments worn thin by endless retelling, quoted, picked apart, and yet here, within the quiet dark of your own space, it lands as though no one has ever seen it before. The shots ring out, the world shifts. The Michael who returns to the table is not the one who left it, and neither are you. Something has changed. The person who first sat down to watch this film, weighed down by years of pretending, is no longer here. Like Michael, you've stepped over an invisible threshold into a new understanding, one from which you cannot return. You did not pull a trigger, but something in you has changed nonetheless. There is no more pretending, only knowing. And then, Italy. The sun is different there. The film breathes in a way you did not expect, as if even violence must take a breath. You had no idea the Godfather would bring you here, to a small village draped in golden light, so removed from the world of dimly lit restaurants that it feels like another film entirely. But here is Michael, quiet, reflective, hiding in the slowness of the old country. He walks between stone houses, along narrow roads lined with lemon trees. He falls in love. He marries. And for a moment, you hope this could be the story, that this will be where he stays. But there is no escaping what he has become. The past waits just outside the frame, thick and slow, as it drapes over terracotta rooftops and filters through the olive trees, pooling in the crevices of worn stone streets. You did not expect to find yourself here either. In the quiet spaces between Michael's exile and your own years of deception, but it is familiar. The way he tries to exist in a place apart, as if distance alone could erase what came before. And yet, it lingers. He wears his past in the way he carries himself, in the way he is watched, in the way his name still holds weight, even when spoken in another language. You think of all the conversations you've sat through, the lines you have echoed without understanding, the performances of knowing that became a habit, that shaped the way you moved through the world. And yet, the truth was always there, waiting to catch up with you, just as it does for him. He will not stay here, and neither will you. Vito Corleone, the titan, the king, the man who orchestrated power like a composer, now moves through the garden, playing with his grandson. The light filters softly through the vines, casting shifting shadows over the earth. His hands, once heavy with consequence, now brush gently over the plump tomatoes, testing their ripeness. He picks a fruit, inhales deeply, as if searching for something, and then suddenly, his body betrays him. A sharp breath, a stumble, a hand reaching towards nothing. His grandson laughs, unaware, weaving between the stalks of green. For all the grand speeches, the careful strategies, the weight of an empire, he dies here, in a sunlit garden, in a moment so small it feels impossible. And somehow, in this inevitability, you see yourself, not in the grandeur of his reign, not in the weight of his decisions, but the quiet truth that even the greatest performances must end. The weight has shifted, not into absence, but into understanding. The charade is gone now, and something else remains. Something softer, something real. By the time the film reaches its final moments, you are still. The door closing on Kay. Michael seated in power. The silence that lingers after the last frame. You know it now. Not just the film, not just the quotes, but the feeling, the quiet, rolling power of it. A story told so well that it no longer belongs just to itself. it belongs to the world. The faded hum of a distant freight train drifts through the night. An echo of footsteps and laughter rise for a moment before being swallowed by the quiet of Washington Avenue. The neighborhood feels both vast and intimate, the rhythm of a city still awake, still moving. You think about all the times you've nodded along to discussions of this film, smiled at references without understanding them. You think about Kay, standing outside of something she will never be let into, watching a door close on a world she thought that she understood. That was you, before tonight, outside of something immense. And now, finally, you are no longer someone who hasn't seen The Godfather. You have arrived. And tomorrow, when a familiar line drifts through the air, you won't only recognize it, you will feel it.